Hey everyone! Welcome back to We Are Cosmic. I'm really glad you're here because today we're diving into something that could change the way the world handles money forever. If you've ever wondered what the future of banking and finance really looks like, then this video is for you. I promise to make it simple and clear, so even if you're not a tech genius, you'll understand why the XRP ledger is such a big deal and why banks are starting to pay attention. You know, there's been so much debate over crypto, especially XRP, with people saying banks will never adopt it, or that it's just some scheme to make Ripple money. Well, today we're going to break all that down and look at the real story behind how XRP could be the engine that powers the next generation of financial systems. So, first things first, I want to thank all of you who like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything and helps me bring these updates to you. And if you're thinking about buying some XRP, I'll link my recommended exchange in the description so you can check it out safely. But for now, let's focus on what's really happening. Over the past few weeks, we've seen something that should make anyone who doubted XRP sit up and pay attention. Major banks that everyone thought would never touch blockchain technology are starting to openly talk about the XRP ledger and its potential to improve how money moves around the world. This isn't just a theory anymore. This is banks planning real-world applications. You see, for a long time, the story about XRP was confusing. People would say, Ripple just wants to sell XRP and make money. Banks don't need it. I even thought some of that could be true when I first started learning about it because there was so much noise and FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt around the project. But the more I researched, the more I realized how mistaken that thinking was. Even with the SEC case against Ripple, no credible evidence ever came out that XRP is just a funding scheme. In fact, Ripple's CEO Brad Garlinghouse and his team have been clear for years that XRP is central to everything they are building. It's not just software, it's the fuel for the new financial system they are designing. And it's not just Ripple saying this. Big banks like Deutsche Bank and SBI Asia are starting to integrate the XRP ledger into their systems. SBI recently announced that they will use the XRP ledger to create practical use cases aimed at the Japanese economy. That's huge because it shows that this isn't just talk. It's implementation. These banks recognize the benefits of a faster, more efficient system for moving money and settling transactions, and they see XRP as a key tool in making that happen. This is what makes XRP different from other cryptos. It's not about hype or speculation. It's about solving a real problem that banks face every day: how to transfer money quickly, securely, and cheaply across borders. Now, I know some of you might be thinking about the price of XRP and wondering if it's worth buying right now. I'll get into that later in the video, but for now, I want to focus on the bigger picture. Technology evolves over time, and the way we handle money today is based on systems built decades ago in the 1960s and 70s. Those systems were revolutionary at the time, but they are slow, expensive, and outdated. Just like the internet changed everything in society, blockchain technology is set to change the financial world. XRP and the XRP ledger are positioned right at the center of that transformation. So stick with me, because in this video, we're going to explore why XRP isn't just another cryptocurrency. We'll look at why banks need it, why Ripple is uniquely positioned to deliver it, and how this technology is likely to be a game changer for the financial system. Even if the price fluctuates, the fundamentals are strong, and understanding those fundamentals is the key to seeing the real opportunity here. By the end of this video, you're going to see why the future isn't just digital, it's powered by blockchain, and XRP is leading the way. Now let's talk about what's actually happening with banks and XRP, because this is where things get really interesting. For years, people said banks would never use blockchain, let alone XRP. The common story was that big financial institutions like Deutsche Bank or Bank of America could just make their own coins or use their own systems, and that there was no need for something like XRP. But the reality is completely different, and once you understand it, it makes perfect sense why XRP is becoming so important. The truth is, most banks are not technology companies. They are financial service firms. They focus on client relationships, products, and services, not building complex digital systems. They don't have the expertise or infrastructure to implement blockchain themselves, especially at the scale needed for global money transfer. That's where Ripple comes in. Ripple isn't just selling software. They're building an entire system that makes blockchain technology easy for banks to use. They work directly with financial institutions to create the rails, the liquidity, and the infrastructure needed for XRP to function in real financial products. A perfect example is G-Treasury, which Ripple recently acquired. G-Treasury connects with over 1,300 financial institutions and settles around $13 trillion every year. By integrating XRP into G-Treasury's products, Ripple is directly placing XRP at the heart of the financial network that banks already use. This isn't speculation, it's real adoption. Banks don't need to invent a new coin or learn blockchain from scratch. They can plug into XRP through the systems Ripple is building. That's why Ripple's approach is so powerful. Think about it for a moment. The current financial system is slow. Cross-border payments take days, fees are high, and settlement and payment processes are often separated, which creates inefficiencies. XRP and the XRP ledger offer a solution to all of that. Transactions can settle in seconds, costs drop significantly, and liquidity can flow in a much more streamlined way. That's why even banks that were previously skeptical are now talking openly about the XRP ledger. Deutsche Bank has discussed it publicly, and SBI Asia is actively creating use cases in Japan. They understand that this is not just about crypto, it's about upgrading a financial system that has barely changed in decades. I know some of you are probably still wondering about the price, and yes, it's natural to focus on that. But here's the key point. The price of XRP doesn't reflect the adoption happening behind the scenes. Just like the internet, when a technology is growing, it takes time for the market to catch up. Banks and institutions are slowly integrating XRP into their processes, and as this adoption increases, the fundamentals become stronger. Price fluctuations are just short-term noise. What really matters is understanding that the infrastructure and adoption are expanding every day. Those who see the bigger picture now have a chance to position themselves before the market fully recognizes the value. Another reason XRP is different from other cryptos is that it's public, not private. Some people argue over whether banks will prefer private blockchains, but the largest institutions are signaling that public chains are the answer. Public chains like the XRP ledger offer transparency, reliability, and speed, all of which are essential for a global financial system. By focusing on public blockchain adoption, Ripple ensures that XRP is at the center of a network that can scale internationally. That's why banks are interested and why XRP is uniquely positioned compared to other cryptocurrencies. The more you look at it, the clearer it becomes. Banks need technology like XRP to modernize. They don't have the ability to create it themselves, and Ripple is in the perfect position to provide it. This is the real use case, the real disruption, and the reason XRP isn't just another digital asset. It's potentially the backbone of a new financial system. Now let's go a little deeper and talk about why so many people were skeptical about XRP in the first place. When I first got into this space, I remember seeing so many claims that Ripple was just selling XRP to make money, that it was a centralized project, or that banks would never use it. Honestly, I understood why some of that confusion existed. There was a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt being spread around, and when you're new to crypto, it can feel overwhelming. People would say, why would a bank need XRP? They can just use Ripple software or make their own coin. At first glance, it seemed like a fair question, but once you start to peel back the layers, the truth is very different. First, let's talk about the SEC case. For years, skeptics said that Ripple was somehow operating illegally, or that XRP was just a tool for the company to raise money. But if you look at the facts, there has never been a credible piece of evidence to support that claim. Even after years of investigation, the SEC did not find anything proving that XRP was being used as an illegal funding scheme. Ripple's leadership, including CEO Brad Garlinghouse, has consistently said that XRP is central to everything they are building. It's not an afterthought. It's not a way to make quick money. It's the fuel that makes the XRP ledger work efficiently for global financial transactions. The real skepticism came from people not understanding how banks operate. Banks are not tech companies. They are service providers. They manage client relationships and structured products, but they are not experts in blockchain technology or digital infrastructure. Most banks haven't even fully solved custody, which is one of the simplest pieces of implementing digital assets. If a bank can't securely hold and manage digital currency, how could it possibly build a global blockchain system on its own? This is why Ripple is so important. Ripple provides the tools, the infrastructure, and the expertise that banks need. They make blockchain usable for institutions that don't specialize in technology. That's a huge advantage, and it explains why adoption is beginning to happen quietly but steadily. We can already see examples of this adoption. SBI Asia announced that they are building practical use cases using the XRP ledger in Japan, specifically targeting their economy to upgrade how payments and settlements work. Deutsche Bank has also shown interest, and other institutions are quietly exploring the same path. This is what I mean when I say we are moving toward a space-age financial system. It's not just hype. Banks are starting to acknowledge that XRP offers real efficiency, speed, and cost reduction that their old systems simply can't match. And yes, price action can be discouraging sometimes. People see dips and panic thinking that adoption or fundamentals aren't growing, but history shows that XRP has experienced major dips before and still went on to massive growth. Back in 2017, XRP had a huge crash before its biggest rally ever. The fundamentals, partnerships, adoption, and infrastructure were still growing steadily, and eventually the price caught up. What's happening now is very similar. Price may fluctuate in the short term, but the real story is the adoption and the expansion of XRP's role in the financial system. So the lesson here is to focus on the bigger picture. Don't get lost in daily or weekly price swings. Look at the partnerships, the institutions adopting XRP, and the way Ripple is strategically placing XRP at the center of a new financial network. These are the things that will matter over time. Fundamentals drive long-term growth, and in this case, the fundamentals are only getting stronger. If you can understand that, you can see why XRP is more than just a crypto token. It's the foundation of a new era in finance. Now let's focus on the infrastructure Ripple is building, because this is where the real picture becomes clear. One of the most important moves Ripple made was acquiring G Treasury, a platform connected to over 1,300 financial institutions that settles roughly $13 trillion annually. That's not a small number. That's trillions moving through banks every year. By integrating XRP into G Treasury systems, Ripple is effectively putting XRP at the heart of global liquidity and cross-border payments. This isn't theory or speculation. This is real adoption, and it shows exactly why XRP is uniquely positioned to lead the next generation of financial systems. Think about how money moves today. If you send money across borders, it can take days to settle, and fees are often high. Banks use old rails built decades ago from the 1960s and 70s, which were revolutionary at the time but are now inefficient. XRP and the XRP ledger offer a way to settle transactions almost instantly, drastically reducing cost and improving efficiency. This is what banks need, and why many of them are quietly adopting Ripple's solutions. Ripple doesn't just give banks a token, they give them a complete system that works with their existing infrastructure. That's why even conservative institutions are paying attention now. One of the reasons people misunderstand this is because they assume banks could build something like XRP themselves. But the truth is, most banks can barely build a user-friendly interface, let alone a global public blockchain with real liquidity. They are structured product firms, not tech companies. This is why the big banks failing to implement their own blockchain solutions is actually good news for XRP holders. It means that a company like Ripple, which specializes in blockchain technology and works directly with banks, will naturally become the bridge that brings them into the new system. This also explains why public blockchains like the XRP ledger are being chosen over private chains. Banks need transparency, speed, and reliability, and public chains provide all of that. Ripple is not just creating a token for speculation, they're creating the infrastructure that powers transactions, liquidity management, and cross-border settlements. This is why announcements from banks like Deutsche Bank and SBI Asia are so important. They're acknowledging that public blockchain technology, specifically XRP, is becoming essential to modernizing the financial system. Another factor to understand is timing. Many people get caught up in short-term price fluctuations, but history tells us that adoption and fundamentals are the real drivers of long-term value. XRP has experienced major dips in the past, only to rally to new highs once its fundamental adoption and integration with financial institutions became more widely recognized. Today, we are seeing something similar. The XRP ledger continues to expand its role in global finance. Partnerships are increasing and real-world use cases are being implemented. Price may move up and down in the short term, but the underlying infrastructure is steadily growing stronger. It's also worth noting that this isn't just about technology, it's about efficiency. Banks are under constant pressure to reduce costs and improve speed for their clients. Ripple's XRP ledger allows them to do exactly that. They can settle transactions in seconds, reduce operational costs, and manage liquidity more effectively. By doing this, Ripple isn't just offering a new tool, they're transforming how money moves globally. And the banks that understand this will adopt it faster than the general market realizes. So, the big takeaway here is simple. Ripple is building real infrastructure, real partnerships, and real use cases. XRP is being placed at the center of the financial system because banks need it, and Ripple has the technology and expertise to make it happen. This is the part many people miss when they focus only on price. The system being built right now is larger than any short-term movement in the market. It's long-term, strategic, and transformative. If you zoom out, you can see the opportunity clearly. XRP isn't just another crypto token, it's becoming the backbone of global payments and liquidity. Now let's talk about one of the most common questions I hear. Why wouldn't banks just create their own coins instead of using XRP? It's a fair question. After all, major banks have enormous resources, right? They could theoretically launch their own digital currencies, develop private blockchains, and manage transactions internally, but the reality is they can't. Most big banks aren't technology companies. They are structured around client services, products, and managing relationships, not building complex blockchain networks. They may have IT departments, but building and scaling a public blockchain that can handle trillions of dollars in daily transactions is an entirely different level. That's why Ripple exists. Ripple is the technology expert. Ripple is the bridge between traditional banks and the next generation blockchain financial system. Think about what banks have tried to do in the past. Some launched internal coins or pilot programs, but adoption has been slow. Why? Because they can't handle custody properly, they struggle with interoperability, and the infrastructure costs are massive. Banks also face regulatory pressure and compliance requirements that make launching a private coin complicated. Ripple solves all of these problems by providing a platform that's already secure, compliant, and integrated with real financial networks. XRP becomes the liquidity tool banks can plug into instead of creating something from scratch. It's faster, cheaper, and easier for them to adopt, and that's why we're seeing banks quietly beginning to implement it. Another point to understand is how Ripple's acquisitions and partnerships strengthen this position. I already mentioned G-Treasury, which connects 1,300 financial institutions and settles roughly $13 trillion annually. By integrating XRP into G-Treasury, Ripple places the token directly into the systems banks are already using. That's huge because it means adoption doesn't require banks to reinvent the wheel. They can use XRP within a framework they already trust. This is why Ripple has been emphasizing the XRP ledger as the beating heart of everything they do. The technology is already being built, tested, and implemented with real-world partners. When you look at the bigger picture, it becomes clear why XRP is uniquely positioned. Blockchain adoption is inevitable. Technology is moving forward, and banks need a reliable, fast, and cost-effective system to process payments globally. Ripple is the company designing those systems, and XRP is the token that powers them. No other cryptocurrency has this combination of technology, adoption, and institutional integration. That's why even though skeptics talk about dips, price fluctuations, or competing coins, the fundamentals remain incredibly strong. XRP is not just another speculative asset, it's infrastructure for the future of finance. Let's also remember how price action can be misleading. XRP has experienced major dips before, like in 2017, right before its largest bull run in history. Fundamentals like partnerships, adoption, and integration with banks continued to grow steadily, even when price temporarily fell. What we're seeing today is similar. Banks are slowly integrating XRP, infrastructure is expanding, and adoption is building quietly. Price may not yet reflect this progress, but over time, it usually catches up. Short-term movements can feel frustrating, but the opportunity lies in understanding the long-term story, and in XRP, that story is incredibly strong. So, here's the takeaway. Banks can't build this themselves. They need Ripple. Ripple has the technology, the expertise, and the partnerships to implement blockchain at a global scale. XRP is being integrated into real-world financial systems, not just hypothetical ideas. This combination of institutional demand, proven technology, and strategic adoption sets XRP apart from nearly every other cryptocurrency in the market today. If you can see past the daily price swings and focus on these fundamentals, it becomes clear that we're watching something transformational unfold. The financial system is being upgraded. Old rails are being replaced with faster, more efficient systems. Banks are participating because they have no choice. They need this technology to compete. And Ripple, with XRP at the core, is perfectly positioned to deliver it. Understanding this is key for anyone looking to see the big picture in crypto. XRP isn't just speculation, it's a foundational part of the future of finance. All right, now let's wrap this all up and look at the bigger picture, because this is where the opportunity really becomes clear. If you've been following along, you already know that XRP is not just another cryptocurrency. It's not about hype or short-term price gains. This is about building the infrastructure for the future of finance. Banks need this technology. They can't build it themselves, and Ripple is perfectly positioned to deliver it. That combination is what makes XRP so different from nearly every other crypto project out there. One of the most important things to understand is how short-term price action can distract people. I know it's tempting to focus on daily or weekly dips, especially when the market feels uncertain. But history has shown us that XRP's fundamentals, partnerships, adoption, and integration into real-world banking systems continue to grow even during price drops. Back in 2017, XRP experienced a major crash, and everyone thought it was finished. Yet shortly after, it went on one of the largest runs in crypto history. The fundamentals were strong, and eventually the market caught up. Right now, we're seeing something similar. Price may be volatile, but the underlying adoption story is only getting stronger. We also need to consider the global impact. Banks around the world are starting to acknowledge that old payment systems built decades ago are outdated. Cross-border transfers take too long, costs are high, and settlements are separated from payments. XRP solves all of that. Transactions can settle in seconds, costs drop dramatically, and liquidity flows more efficiently. This is why banks like Deutsche Bank and SBI Asia are exploring real-world use cases using the XRP ledger. They're not doing this because it's trendy. They're doing it because it solves real problems in the financial system. And remember, Ripple isn't just offering a token, they're offering a complete system. The XRP ledger, combined with acquisitions like G-Treasury and strategic partnerships, allows banks to integrate blockchain into their existing infrastructure seamlessly. This is why Ripple emphasizes that XRP is at the heart of everything they do. They are not experimenting with other chains or relying on banks to develop their own coins. XRP is the solution that bridges the gap between traditional finance and the future blockchain-based system. If you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, it becomes clear that this is more than a crypto investment. This is a chance to witness and participate in the transformation of the global financial system. Banks need faster, cheaper, and more efficient systems, and Ripple is uniquely positioned to provide that. XRP is at the center of this transformation. Even though the price may fluctuate in the short term, the long-term fundamentals, adoption, technology, partnerships, and infrastructure are only getting stronger. So what does this mean for you as an investor or someone interested in crypto? It means patience and perspective are key. Don't get caught up in short-term dips or hype. Focus on the adoption story, the technology, and how XRP is being integrated into real-world banking systems. Understand that we are watching a transformation of a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and XRP is positioned to play a central role in that change. The opportunity isn't in timing the market perfectly, it's in understanding where the fundamentals are going and positioning yourself accordingly. In the end, XRP isn't just about price, it's about impact. It's about modernizing a financial system that hasn't changed in decades. It's about providing banks with the tools they need to move money faster, cheaper, and more efficiently. And it's about being part of the next generation financial system that could affect billions of people around the world. If you keep your focus on the big picture and understand the real use cases, the story is clear. Ripple and XRP are not only relevant, they're essential. Thank you so much for watching, for supporting We Are Cosmic, and for taking the time to understand the fundamentals behind XRP. Keep your eyes on the adoption, not just the price.